Seamwork Radio is on a little break, so for this month we're re-airing some of our favorite episodes. Choosing a favorite episode was kind of like choosing a favorite child, but ultimately I chose A Radical Change in Confidence with Jenny Rushmore of Cashmerette Patterns. This was actually our very first episode of Seamwork Radio, so it holds an extra special place in my heart. In this episode, Jenny talks about the way sewing her clothing reframed her relationship with her body. In my years teaching sewing, I've seen this transformation happen countless times, but I have to tell you, it never gets old seeing people light up with creativity and a new appreciation for their bodies. Jenny has been really busy since we recorded this episode back in 2015. Since then, she's been running her thriving pattern company, Cashmerette Patterns, even expanding beyond plus-size patterns for a size range that now includes 0 to 32, with C to H cup sizes. And Jenny just launched a book titled Ahead of the Curve, which is part pattern book, part fitting resource. It includes 5 basic garment patterns, plus a ton of fit info. We're actually giving away a signed copy this month on our Instagram, so be sure to hop on over to the Seamwork Instagram account to check that out. And be sure to catch up with Jenny at Cashmerette.com and on Instagram at Cashmerette. See you for a new year of Seamwork Radio really soon.
From the age of about 10 to about the age of 33, I thought I temporarily looked like this. And any day now, it would change.
From Seamwork Magazine, I'm Sari Mitnick, and this is Seamwork Radio, where we tell stories about designing, making, and wearing our own clothing. Jenny Rushmore is the writer behind Cashmerette, a blog she writes from the perspective of a plus-size sewer. She's also a founder of the online community, the Curvy Sewing Collective. Jenny's the kind of woman you'd love to meet at a party. She's warm, approachable, talkative. She's also incredibly well-traveled. Jenny's lived in 9 different countries, including her current home in the US. She radiates self-confidence, and she's just fun to be around. But she didn't always have confidence. In fact, things were pretty bad growing up. Jenny's British, but mostly grew up in Scotland. As a kid, she was ostracized and bullied, and that led to some pretty distorted feelings about who she was and what she looked like. But her first memory of being singled out for her size didn't come from other kids. It was from adults.
I remember at the age of 5 being told that my tummy stuck out too much to be in a ballet class, which when you think about it now is obscene, right? Like that shouldn't be allowed. Like it was the shape of my body. Like it wasn't fat. And even if I was a fat 5-year-old, you can still do ballet at 5. And I think that was, I wonder if that did like spark something a little bit.
Jenny faced relentless bullying from other kids, starting around 8 years old.
8 to 14, something like that. It was pretty harsh. I think bullying's worse in the UK than it is in some other countries. I don't know why. Maybe the way the discipline is in schools. But yeah, it was pretty bad.
Her parents tried to help by moving her from school to school, but Jenny remained isolated. She was picked on because of her size and because she was maturing faster than other kids.
They pick on that you're doing very well in school and your grades and then what you look like. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, like it's very disproportionate because like I said, I look back on pictures and I'm like, I don't think I was that big, but you only have to be a little bit different than other people.
Living in a rural area and sticking out, Jenny really never felt like she had a lot of friends.
And it didn't help that I had an English accent while living in Scotland. That did not help because the Scottish don't like the English very much, at least not in the countryside.
Was that part of the bullying?
I think at the beginning it was, yeah.
Yeah. What form did the bullying take? Was it?
It was like mostly verbal, but some physical.
Really?
But like fundamentally about isolation, like that you're different. And that you don't belong, so we're not going to include you.
Freezing you out.
Yeah. I went through a whole year where pretty much no one spoke to me in my school. Because if you did, you would get beaten up by the other people. So what I did is I went to the school library every lunchtime and every break time, and I read every book that Terry Pratchett had ever written. So that was what I did when I was like 11.
Jenny couldn't wait to grow up and leave. In fact, she left home before she could even drive. After university, she decided to go even further. She spent a year living in Malawi, a small country in the southeastern part of Africa.
Malawi was like really my first introduction to like people who had like radically different, like even like thought structures than I did. Like I didn't realize it was possible to think differently. I thought you could think different thoughts, but I didn't realize that like your conception of the world could be as fundamentally different as it was in Malawi. And it was incredibly good for me. We were living in like a hut along with other villagers, no bathroom, no running water, about a mile from the nearest road. And I had the absolute time of my life. I mean, it was amazing. Actually, it was funny when I went there because, you know, I was probably at the highest weight that I'd been. And I turned up and there were lots of little kids around, so like 4 and 5 year olds. And I love kids, like absolutely love kids. And like little like Malawian 4 year olds, like I just eat them with a spoon. Lovely. So they're all running around and they're not scared of us. The older kids were a little bit scared when we turned up because it was me and this other woman. And we went to the next door neighbor to say hi. So we knock on her door. She answers and she's like, "Oh, my son has been hanging out with you today. He said that there's a very fat woman next door." So I'm like 19 and I'm just like, because at this point, I almost feel like people aren't noticing maybe, and I am not chill with it at all. I'm like, yes, hi. And I was just so thrown. And my friend, who was like not overweight, was just like, so we kind of carry on. I'm like, okay. So we have our first day of school, and I walk to the front, and I literally start hearing, fat, oh, fat. All the girls saying that I'm fat, right? I'm like, okay, I'm just going to ignore it. Whatever, like it's awkward, but cultural differences, fine. Fast forward to like a month later or 2 months later, and I'm in the teacher's room, and everyone else is Malawian, just me and my friend Anna wasn't. And they say something about me, do I have a husband? And I make a joke, and I'm basically like, effectively I say, oh, I don't have a husband. I mean, well, I'm fat, you know, ha, 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 ha. And the guy looks at me and he's like, sorry? So I repeat myself, and he's like, hold on a second. And he goes over and he speaks to his friend and he comes back and he kind of tilts his head and looks at me and says, "You say you don't have a husband because you're fat?" And I'm like, well, yeah, you know, oh, never mind. Just forget I said it. But, you know, like I'm not, you know, not going to be like top of the list. And he looked at me and he went, "When you turned up on the first day, we had a village meeting to talk about you." And he said, we had this discussion. And the discussion was, we did not know that there were beautiful white women in the world. Because we hadn't seen many. They didn't have television, so they'd only seen other volunteers who were normally like lithe 18-year-old girls. And he's like, we didn't know that they existed. And then we said, and this was hilarious because my friend Anna was standing next to me, we said, this Jenny, she is beautiful in the face and the body, whereas Anna is neither beautiful in the face nor the body. So I'm like, both of us are in like utter shock, like for different reasons. And I'm like, So anyway, so it turned out that, I mean, I guess I should have known this, but I didn't, that in Malawi, the bigger you are, the more beautiful. And then as soon as I understood this and it slotted in, I'm like, wait a second. The biggest girls were the most popular ones. They were the ones that had the girlfriends. They used to announce at like assembly, please do not eat the dirt. You think it will make you fat, but it won't. It will make you skinny because you'll get thin. And the girls would do things like not exercise because they wanted to be bigger. And literally like the ringleaders, the confident girls, the ones who would speak to us were all the much bigger girls. And I mean, it was crazy, right? Like, it was very good for me probably as a 20-year-old or 19 or however old I was. But it was like, such an upending. And then I was getting marriage proposals and like all kinds of things. And the kind of funny coda is that I lost a lot of weight when I was there because I think I probably had something the whole time because the sanitary conditions weren't great. So I lost like, I don't know, 30, 40 pounds or something. And there was concern expressed. They had another village meeting to discuss the fact that I was losing weight and that potentially I was bringing shame on the village because the beautiful white woman had appeared and they had like damaged me and they were going to be sending me back less beautiful. And they were also concerned about my tan. So yeah, that was a very funny experience.
Despite being treated like a bombshell in Malawi, Jenny really didn't feel that much better about her body.
I think at the time I was like, well, it's great that I'm like a supermodel in Malawi, but I'm not in Europe. So it kind of doesn't matter that it is here, right? And like, I understand why from an economic perspective they think that. And a bit of me was like, yeah, well, if they got richer, they wouldn't think that anymore, right? Like they think it because it's linked to wealth. So I think I kind of rationalized it. But it was interesting, particularly the whole like bullying dynamic and seeing that it was the opposite way around.
She'd faced so much bullying growing up. She still carried this belief that she just was not very likable, at least to people who didn't know her well. After her time in Malawi, Jenny accepted a job with a large corporation, and they sent her to live in Geneva, Switzerland.
So I was like 22 or 23 or something. I was living in Switzerland, and I'd only just moved there, so I didn't know anyone very well. And I was driving with my friend Keely, and she said, oh, my friend's coming, into town. Like, will you come over and hang out? And I'm like, sure. I said, the only thing is I'm not very good with people, like, and especially new people, so she might not like me. And Keely just like was like, what? I'm like, well, I'm just not, I'm not that likable to new people. So like, she might have to like get to know me a bit. And Keely was just like, are you joking? I'm like, no. And she's like, but you're not like that at all. Like, you're actually the opposite. Like, you're the person I would choose to introduce to new people because you're kind of warm and chatty and everything. And it was like literally like the clouds parted, because all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, my self-image and how I actually behave is so separated out. And it was like this moment of realizing like, wow, like that isn't me anymore. Like that was me maybe when I was 14 years old, because I was kind of angry at everyone for being like this. And I wasn't being very, warm to people. And it was quite funny. It was one of those shifts. And I think it's made me realize occasionally, like I try and like check in with myself and I'm like, what else like do I perceive about myself or about my relationships or things that are going on that maybe actually isn't true anymore?
Living abroad, first in Geneva and then later in Greece, Jenny continually confronted new and different ways of seeing the world.
And I quickly learned like that my worldview was not everyone's worldview. And there are lots of different ways of being, and that I was a specific way. And it's like that thing where they talk about the goldfish being aware of the water suddenly, right? It was like, oh, I'm not just like the normal basic of everything. Like I have certain beliefs and behave in certain ways.
She found Greece to be particularly challenging.
I mean, first of all, like British people on the whole, and me included, are very unconfrontational. Don't tend to tell people when we're upset about things. If anything, we'll be passive aggressive, but don't shout. And in my office, people would have screaming matches where they were like across the open plan office, like screaming, like red-faced in each other's faces. And then the next day, they'd be smoking a cigarette and having coffee together. Fine, no problem at all. Just getting it out of their system. And to me, it's like, if I ever had a coffee, that would be like the worst fight of my life. And also, I'd never speak to that person again, like unless like some radical like counseling took place.
Each time Jenny moved to a new country, she learned something new about her worldview. But she was also learning things about herself and about how her perceptions of who she really was were shaped by other people. Jenny finally moved to the US, and that's where she lives today.
The first time anyone, apart from my parents, ever said like something explicitly positive to me. Do you know what I mean? Like someone, I think when I've been here a few months, someone said to me like, Jenny, I really admire you and the things you've done. And like, you seem to be like, like really achieving a lot. That's great. I was like so shocked because no one had ever said that to me in my entire life, apart from my parents. And I think I said to them like, are you kidding? Which is really rude. But at the time I didn't really appreciate it.
Jenny had lived all over the world and had learned new ways of seeing things, including herself. But Jenny still struggled with self-acceptance, and especially with finding clothes that fit. She still carried around a lot of that emotional baggage from all those years of bullying, not to mention the images of women in magazines and advertising that we all live with. Coming up, how Jenny not only found her own confidence, but began bringing it to other women, and how she stood up to being bullied as an adult with their help.
I think that's been the most unexpected thing for me, actually. Like, it seemed like a solitary thing when I started doing it, and it's turned out to be like anything but solitary.
This podcast is created by the team at Seamwork. We're here to help you design and sew your own wardrobe. You can check out our patterns, classes, and community by visiting us at seamwork.com. If you like the idea of creating your own wardrobe but really struggle with actually making things that you want to wear, check out our free downloadable sewing planner. It's available at seamwork.com/go/planner. It's a totally free printable PDF, and you can use it to help you create a small collection of pieces that fits your style and your real life. It'll help you to define your goals, create a palette, design some looks, and then create a queue of projects to sew. Just visit seamwork.com/go/planner, enter your email address, and then we'll send it to you right away. We'll also send you a series of emails that gives you some tips and actually helps walk you through using the planner. So again, that URL is seamwork.com/go/planner, or just check for the link in the show notes. This is Seamwork Radio. I'm Sari Mitnick. Jenny Rushmore was living in Boston and had never really thought about making her own clothes. Then one day, a coworker came in wearing this really awesome striped skirt.
And I was like, that's an amazing skirt. I said, where did you get it from? And she said, IKEA. And I genuinely was like, do they do clothes now? And she's like, no, the fabric. And I literally still didn't understand, right? Because I didn't connect fabric and clothes. So I'm just like, what? She's like, well, I sewed it. And I was like, no way. That's like witchcraft. And she's like, no, I've been doing it since I was a kid. Like, it actually isn't that hard. It's just a pencil skirt with a zip. And I was just like, I mean, if I could do that, like, my whole life would be different. But I don't think that's ever going to happen.
It took a while for Jenny to seriously consider learning to sew. But then she went through a breakup, and she wanted to try something new just to help her move on.
So I signed up for this class at this tiny, tiny place in Boston in an old school. And the class was terrible. The woman didn't know what she was doing. But what I did do is thread a machine and push a piece of fabric through it. And I was just overwhelmed with this somehow. And I've seen it happen to other people, actually. Like, the very first time they push a piece of fabric through and connect two things. And they're like, whoa, like, that's a lot of potential in that.
The idea of all that potential just grew in Jenny's mind. She dreamed of making a wrap dress. It was her favorite style to wear because it was easy to fit over her bust. She always felt good in them.
If I could ever make myself a wrap dress, that would be like amazing. But I don't think that's ever going to happen. So like, don't set that expectation. I mean, I'm never going to be able to make a wrap dress. But, maybe I can make a cushion or something. And then, it really just spiraled.
After a year of following tutorials and some basic sewing books, Jenny did make her first wrap dress.
If you see the photos of me from then, I'm like beaming. I'm like so happy about it. I was telling every single person I came about, like, I made this. And they'd be like, really? I'd be like, yes.
At first, Jenny had a lot of difficulty adapting to the idea of learning through failure. As a self-described type A person, part of her finds it difficult to do things if she's not confident that she can do them really, really well.
No, I just had this thing that like, well, I don't know how to sew zips. So, I have to sew things without zips in. And even now I have to remind myself, like, you don't know how to sew with something until you try to sew with that thing. Like, you can read all the theory you want, but it's only the first time you try and sew a zip that you're going to learn. And I am really A-type. So it's a bit problematic because I find it hard to be bad at something. And I think that's why, like, a lot of my creative things, like, I would get to a certain point and then give up because I'd be like, well, I'm not really that good. But something about sewing, like, I pushed through the bad years, and I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't mind. Like, there's something about this that's so compelling in a way that other things just never had been. And maybe it was part of like the burgeoning body issue thing and not having to buy clothes and the possibilities. Like, I thought about it constantly. And even now I think about it quite a lot. But at the time, like, when I was at work, I was just thinking about sewing the entire time and what I could do and what the possibilities were. I just wasn't always capable of realizing them. But even now, like, I got some mean comment on a website when I made a cashmere coat and it didn't really work out well. And someone said like, oh, it offends me to see this like new person using cashmere and she doesn't know what she wants to do. She doesn't know how to use it. I was like, well, how do you learn how to make a cashmere coat without making a cashmere coat? Like, did I do things wrong? Yes. I read about them. I still did them wrong. And I'm sorry. And it is a shame. And yes, like, it's not a perfect coat in the end. But like, until you try and do it, you can't.
She still struggles with this, but it's getting better. More recently, she made her first pair of jeans.
Jeans have never fitted me well because proportionately my waist is bigger and my hips and thighs are smaller, which is like the opposite to most women. So either they are way too tight at the waist, which is what I usually wore, or they fit my waist and there's handfuls of like fabric under my bum. And when Heather Liu at Closet Case Files came out with the ginger jeans, I saw them. I'm like, nice, but hey, not for me. Like, I don't do jeans. And I started seeing like plus size women wearing them. And also a rumor went around that the 18 was roomy because I'm really a 20. And I thought, I'll give it a go. And it was like angels came down from heaven, because they're the best fitting jeans I've ever made. Because of course that makes sense, right? Because I picked a waist size that worked for me. And then I made adjustments to take all the excess out of the thighs and below the bum. And now I literally went and threw all my jeans away, because there's no way I'm wearing the other ones now, like when I know that these ones can be so good. But if you told me like a year ago that I would make my own jeans, I'd be like, I don't think so.
But even beyond the ability to make clothes that fit her body, instead of always trying to make her body fit into clothes, she's discovered this really incredible, vibrant community online through her sewing blog, Cashmerette. When she started her blog, she never expected anyone would read it other than her friends and her family. But over time, she began hearing from other women with their own blogs.
And it just introduced me to so many people, to begin with virtually, right? Like on blogs, and I would comment. And so I'm very good friends with Mary Danielson Perry, who writes Idle Fancy, and she lives in Texas. And I was a total fangirl. I thought she was amazing. And one day she commented on my blog. And to this point, no one who I didn't know had commented. It was just friends and family. And I just like fanning I was just like, what? Like, Mary from Idle Fancy reads me? That's insane. Like, I couldn't believe it. And over time, like, things would happen where like other people who I looked up to would do the same. So like Marcy, who's Una Baluna, did it. And I was like, I mean, this is beyond my wildest dreams. And like, they know who I am. And of course, everyone's just real people. And sewing people are the best people as well. Like, there's just no getting around it.
These friendships started moving offline too, both in her hometown, which is Boston, but also in cities around the world when she travels.
I was in Tokyo 2 months ago. I met up with Yoshimi the flying squirrel, and Novita, a very purple person. I went down to Austin, and like about 15 women turned out and met me. In New York, I see like, dozens of women every time I go there, and in London too. And it's like everywhere, and it's so amazing.
In 2013, Jenny and Mary organized a blog tour with some of their friends for the Colette Patterns Monita dress, each making their own version of the dress and then writing about it on their blogs. This was really the genesis of the Curvy Sewing Collective.
And we took our pictures, and it was so exciting. And we were all just like chatting on email, and we were like, and it launched, and you had amazing comments, both about the Moneta, but also about, us doing it, and people being very positive about like first images you seeing being plus size women. And we were so excited. And all of a sudden we started chatting. We were like, oh, we feel like we can't leave it here. Like, there's something here, right? And someone said, well, maybe we could do a website.
Today, the Curvy Sewing Collective is a thriving community, and it's a place where women go to look for ideas, feedback, and just have discussions on what's going on in the sewing world.
We have a huge amount of people writing about like the positive role models that they see, and that they see that like we're all like happy and healthy and positive and feel good about ourselves, and that makes them feel good. And we're very open. We just have a new series called Sewing for My Curves, and I hit it off, and it was literally like, here are my measurements, and here's my bust size, and here are the adjustments I do, and here's what I wear. And we're going to do it with like different body types over time. And people are just so positive. They're like, oh, I just always assumed I couldn't do this and this and this, but I can.
As she sees it, the problem is that women believe they need to make themselves fit the clothes, instead of the other way around.
I worked for Procter & Gamble for about 10, 11 years, and I worked for Gillette for a while. And we did this market research on razors, and I used to be in charge of Gillette Venus, the women's razors. And we found in market research, it was so funny, that if men cut themselves when they're shaving, they say, what is wrong with this razor? It's broken, it's faulty, you need to do something about it, in research. And when women cut themselves, they go, oh, I'm so sorry, like, I was such a klutz, or like, I didn't know how to do it, or whatever. And it was like, it just explained everything. It's just like, men assume it's the tool, and like, they probably did fine, and women assume that it's their problem.
The Jenny today is very different from the Jenny growing up. She reflected on this when she first saw the It Gets Better campaign, which is a movement designed to help prevent suicide among LGBT youth.
I don't know, this might be a bad analogy, but when, when Dan Savage came out with It Gets Better stuff, which is like, awesome, it actually made me incredibly upset, because while I'm straight, I was thinking about me aged like 12 or 13, and someone saying like, it gets better just from the situation you're in, not from being gay, but from feeling like so different, and like you didn't fit in, and like everything was going to be bad. And I was like, wow, I wish there'd be more of that kind of thing when I was that age. I mean, it's fantastic that they do this stuff for LGBT youth, but like even for me, like somehow it resonated with me a lot at the time as well. Like I kind of wish I'd known at that age that it was going to get a lot better.
This summer, Jenny was attacked by an online troll. This person commented on a photo of her in which she was looking beautiful and glowing and happy in this dress that she just made, and told her that she ought to eat less cake. This is exactly the modern incarnation of that childhood bully that tormented her so badly for so many years. But this time, instead of hiding away in the library, her response was very different. Jenny created the hashtag #CakeWithCashmerette. She invited the sewing community to post photos of themselves with cake as a symbolic protest. Hundreds of sewers joined in, creating this amazing gallery of women of all shapes and sizes, just gleefully enjoying their cake. It was a chance to laugh at the bullies who believe that they have the right to tell us what to eat and how to look. Jenny has not only found her community, she's become one of their leaders.
Being able to wear what I want to wear and in a size that looks good on me without feeling judged or that it's not possible by someone else. I mean, it's life-changing. I just really wish that all women could do that.
Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. Podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork, or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.